Well, you'll appreciate that this is a developing story. And just after that interview, the Ontario Premier released this statement on the ad campaign stating the following, quote, "Our intention was always to initiate a conversation about the kind of economy that Americans want to build and the impact of tariffs on workers and businesses. We have achieved our goal, having reached U.S. audiences at the highest levels. In speaking with the Prime Minister Carney, Ontario will now pause its U.S. advertising campaign effective Monday so that trade talks can resume." Again, that is the statement that we received this afternoon from the Ontario Premier. To talk about all of this, we're now reaching out to David Jacobson, currently with the Wilson Centre. From 2009 to 2013, he served as the 29th United States Ambassador to Canada. Ambassador Jacobson, always good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Good to see you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Listen, I want to begin with that Ontario ad. We know that they will run through this weekend, coinciding with the first two games of the World Series. They will then, as you heard in that statement, be pulled come Monday in hopes of restarting trade talks. What do you think of that strategy?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that running an ad a couple of times would have some fundamental impact on the American people or the folks in Congress, or certainly on Donald Trump. Um, but the ad, at least as I understand it, was accurate. And I think the president's response to it was rather petulant. But the question in my mind, there was one thing that the premier said in his statement was so that trade talks can begin again. And I am not positive that pulling the ad on Monday is going to get trade talks started again. The president tends to change his mind a lot. Maybe he'll change his mind about this, but it is by no means a certainty.
Is that because the ad did that much damage, or you think it's given the administration an excuse to walk away from talks right now?
I don't think the ad did any enormous damage to anything. And I'm not sure if it's an excuse to walk away from talks, if it's a negotiation strategy. The president seems to think he's the greatest negotiator in the history of the world. And he clearly likes to be aggressive in negotiations. He has cut off talks with Canadians before. He has cut off talks with everybody before at one point or another. And then he seems to come back to the table. I suspect that is what's going to happen here, but there's no certainty of that.
Yeah, no certainty, and just no certainty, as you say. Although at this point, we know that tariffs are hurting, Canadians and hurting Americans. I was reading that in terms of Americans, with the automakers in the United States, these tariffs in these last few months have already cost the industry $10 billion. And I saw another estimate that says tariffs would cost American small businesses over $80 billion collectively. Where is the business community right now, the industry right now? Have they been making appeals to Donald Trump? Is that a worthwhile avenue?
They have a number of businesses have gone to the president. When I was the ambassador, while I then and now have great affection for Canada and had a wonderful time there, my fundamental view then and now was what's good for the United States. And these tariffs are not good for the United States. As you point out, they hurt manufacturers, they raise the prices for consumers, they disrupt supply chains, and create great uncertainty in the marketplace. So from the US perspective, let alone the Canadian perspective, these things are not good.
Mhm. I wonder what your advice would be right now to the Canadian government. And I appreciate that's not your role, but here they are trying to navigate this administration, trying to come up with at least some side deals before we get to the CUSMA, the USMCA review next year. What is your advice to the Carney government right now?
Well, first of all, I don't think Mark Carney needs my advice. I will say, as a matter of disclosure, I'm good friends with the Prime Minister. I think he's a quite able person. Um, I think if he wanted to know what I had to say, the first thing I would do is tell everybody to take a deep breath. As we talked about, the president may change his mind on Tuesday or Thursday or today. I would sort of perceive this as a pause and not the end of conversations between the United States and Canada. Um, it- Canada, like many other countries around the world, has to walk a very thin tightrope. On the one hand, for a whole lot of reasons, some of them domestic political, some of them just because it's right. There's a feeling that you want to, I think the term that Prime Minister has used is elbows up. You want to be aggressive. On the other hand, you are dealing with someone who is very thin-skinned. He sees an ad on TV and decides to penalize 35 million people in Canada and 350 million people in the United States. I would be very careful in how I go forth. The other thing, though, that I would do, and I believe the Prime Minister is doing this, I think literally as we speak, is looking for other markets. The United States is always going to be the largest export market for Canada. It's true because of geography, language, the size of our market, history, a whole lot of reasons. But it doesn't have to be 75 or 80%. And if I were Canada, just like if I were France or I were any other country that's having a problem with the US tariffs, I would be looking to broaden my export base. It's never going to make up for the United States, but it's going to ameliorate the problem. And I think fundamentally, if you ask, what should the strategy be? It should be do as little damage as possible over the course of the next 3 years of the Trump administration. Hopefully things will get better, and hopefully the next guy will be a little bit more reasonable.
Ambassador Jacobson, as I say, always appreciate the time. Thank you for this.
It's a pleasure. Happy to talk anytime.
You take care.